So, Mark, today I wanted to talk about vocabulary, probably one of the most challenging parts of mastering English quickly. What do you think is the biggest obstacle learners face when trying to build their vocabulary fast?
Great topic, Sarah. I'd say the biggest challenge is not just memorizing words, but remembering and actually using them. Learners often cram long lists of words but forget them quickly because they don't have meaningful ways to practice or connect those words to real life.
Exactly. That's why many get discouraged. They feel overwhelmed by the sheer number of new words and unsure how to use them in context. So, what's your go-to strategy for mastering vocabulary fast and easily?
My top advice is to focus on frequency and relevance. Instead of random words, prioritize learning words that appear often in everyday conversations or texts, and those that are relevant to your own life, hobbies, or work. When you learn vocabulary that matters to you, it sticks better and motivates you to use it.
That's a smart approach. I often tell my students to start with the 1,000 most common English words, but also to personalize their list based on what interests them. Can you give an example of how you personalize vocabulary learning?
Sure. For instance, if you love cooking, start with food-related words like recipe, ingredients, boil, or spice. If you're into sports, focus on words like score, team, goal, and coach. Then use these words actively by writing sentences or talking about your interests. This creates a stronger mental connection.
And that's so much more effective than just repeating word lists. Speaking of which, how do you recommend learners review and memorize new vocabulary without it feeling like a boring chore?
Making learning fun is key. One popular method I suggest is spaced repetition. Use apps like Anki or Memrise that show you words just before you're likely to forget them. Also, try mixing in games, flashcards with pictures, or watching videos where those words appear naturally. The variety keeps your brain engaged.
I love spaced repetition. But sometimes learners say they feel word fatigue. They learn lots of words but can't recall them during conversation. How can they fix that?
That's where active usage comes in. Passive recognition, knowing a word when you see or hear it, is one thing, but being able to produce it in speech or writing is another. I encourage learners to use new words immediately in sentences, speak them aloud, write short paragraphs, or even teach them to a friend. The more you use a word, the stronger your recall.
That reminds me of a technique called the word notebook, where learners write new words along with example sentences. Do you think that's effective?
Absolutely. A word notebook is fantastic because it combines writing, which reinforces memory, with contextual learning. When you create your own sentences, you personalize the word, making it easier to remember. I also suggest reviewing your notebook regularly and trying to add new examples or related words.
That's a great point about adding related words. Can you explain how grouping words thematically or by association helps with vocabulary building?
Sure. Grouping words by themes, like weather, emotions, or travel, creates mental links between words, making them easier to remember. For example, if you learn rain, you might also learn umbrella, cloudy, storm, and wet. Your brain creates a web of related concepts that helps with recall. It's much better than isolated memorization.
I totally agree. I've also heard of learners using mind maps for vocabulary. What's your take on that?
Mind maps are excellent visual tools. You start with a central theme, then branch out related words and phrases. The visual layout helps some learners see connections more clearly and organizes vocabulary in a memorable way. Plus, creating a mind map is an active learning process, which boosts retention.
Okay, so we've covered relevance, repetition, active use, and grouping. What about pronunciation? Sometimes learners focus so much on vocabulary meaning that they forget how to say the words correctly. How important is pronunciation for mastering vocabulary?
Pronunciation is essential. If you learn a new word but can't pronounce it well, you might hesitate to use it or be misunderstood. I recommend listening to native speakers, using pronunciation apps, and practicing aloud regularly. Tools like Forvo or Google's pronunciation feature are handy. Also, breaking words down into syllables and practicing slowly helps.
That's practical advice. For learners who want to practice pronunciation and vocabulary together, what's a good daily routine?
I suggest a 10-minute daily routine. 1. Listen to a short audio or watch a video with new words. 2. Repeat words and sentences aloud, focusing on pronunciation, shadowing technique. 3. Write down new words with example sentences. 4. Use those words in your own sentences aloud or in writing. This combination trains your ear, mouth, and brain simultaneously.
Shadowing is such a powerful tool. Could you explain it briefly for listeners who might be new to it?
Of course. Shadowing is when you listen to someone speaking, a sentence or phrase, and immediately repeat it out loud, trying to imitate their pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation as closely as possible. It's like following their shadow in speech. This helps with fluency, accent reduction, and memorization of new vocabulary.
I see. Do you have any tips for choosing good materials for shadowing?
Yes. Choose content that interests you and matches your level. It could be podcasts, movie dialogues, or speeches. The sentences should be short and clear enough to repeat confidently. Start slow and gradually increase difficulty. Also, transcripts or subtitles help you follow along and understand meaning.
So far, we've talked about techniques for vocabulary acquisition. What about common mistakes learners make when trying to learn vocabulary quickly?
One big mistake is trying to learn too many words at once without enough practice, leading to burnout or forgetting most words. Another is neglecting context, learning words without understanding how to use them naturally. Also, some learners focus only on passive knowledge, not practicing active recall through speaking or writing.
Those are important points. How can learners avoid these pitfalls?
Focus on quality over quantity. Learn fewer words well rather than many superficially. Always learn words in context, read or listen to how they're used in sentences. And practice active recall daily by speaking, writing, or teaching others. Lastly, be patient and consistent. Language learning is a journey, not a race.
I couldn't agree more. Consistency and patience are often underrated. What motivational tips do you have for learners who want to stick to their vocabulary goals?
Set clear, achievable goals like learning 5 new words per day or writing a short story using new vocabulary weekly. Celebrate small successes, for example, reward yourself after a week of consistent practice. Also, keep a vocabulary journal to track your progress. Surround yourself with English content you enjoy to make learning fun rather than a chore.
Those are excellent suggestions. Before we wrap up this part, could you share a memorable moment from your own vocabulary learning experience that motivated you?
Sure. I remember struggling with phrasal verbs. They felt impossible to master. One day, I challenged myself to write a diary entry using 10 new phrasal verbs. It was hard at first, but after I finished, I felt proud and noticed I could use them more naturally in conversations. That small win pushed me to keep going.
What a great example of turning a challenge into motivation.
Vocabulary mastery is a game changer in language learning, and I'm glad we're exploring it deeply.
Now that we've talked about the importance of context and active use, let's discuss how learners can incorporate new vocabulary naturally into their daily conversations. What do you suggest?
I always tell learners to create real opportunities to use new words. This might mean joining language exchanges, speaking clubs, or simply practicing with friends. The key is to use new vocabulary spontaneously, without waiting for the perfect moment. The more you use a word, the more it becomes part of your active vocabulary.
Some learners hesitate because they're afraid of making mistakes when using new words. How can they overcome that fear?
It's common to feel that way. My advice is to start in low-pressure situations, talk to yourself, write journals, or chat with patient friends. Remember, mistakes are part of learning. Also, seek feedback from people who support you, so you can learn and improve without feeling judged.
How can technology help in practicing vocabulary effectively?
There are many helpful tools. Flashcard apps with spaced repetition are key. Beyond that, interactive games, quizzes, and speech recognition apps help with pronunciation and context. Some apps provide examples in sentences and allow you to hear words spoken in different accents, which is great for listening and speaking skills.
How should learners use podcasts for vocabulary learning?
For spaced repetition, I like Anki and Memrise. Duolingo and Babbel are great for structured lessons. Quizlet offers customizable flashcards. For pronunciation, Elsa Speak is very effective. Podcasts like The English We Speak and 6-Minute English from BBC provide contextual learning.
Which apps do you recommend?
Pick episodes on topics you enjoy. Listen first for general understanding, then listen again with transcripts. Write down new words, look them up, and try making your own sentences. Shadowing parts aloud also improves retention and pronunciation.
Can you explain a shadowing exercise using podcasts?
Sure. Choose a short audio clip, 15 to 30 seconds. Listen carefully to how the speaker says it, then immediately repeat out loud, mimicking their pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation. Repeat until it feels natural. This technique links vocabulary to natural speech patterns, making recall easier during conversations.
What if learners find shadowing intimidating?
Start small with short phrases or sentences. Use slower audio or read transcripts alongside. Practice daily for 5 minutes to build confidence. Remember, the goal is progress, not perfection. Celebrate small improvements.
How can vocabulary notebooks help?
A notebook is excellent because writing engages memory. Include not only the new word but definitions, example sentences, synonyms, antonyms, and personal notes like, heard in a movie. Regular review of the notebook helps transfer words from short-term to long-term memory.
How often should learners review their notebooks?
Weekly reviews work well. Try recalling meanings before checking, and use words in new sentences. Occasional reviews of older entries are important too. Spaced repetition reinforces memory. Turning review sessions into quizzes or games keeps motivation high.
How does gamification help vocabulary learning?
Gamification taps into our love for rewards and challenges. Many apps use points, badges, or leaderboards to encourage learning. Setting goals and rewarding yourself, like a treat after finishing a level, makes studying enjoyable. Some learners create games with friends, such as vocabulary bingo or flashcard races, which adds a fun social element.
Can you share simple vocabulary games learners can play alone or with friends?
Word association is fun. Say a word, then quickly say the first related word that comes to mind. For example, ocean, waves, beach, sand. It reinforces connections. Another is story building, where you create a short story using 5 to 10 new words, either written or spoken. These activities boost recall and creativity.
What about abstract or tricky words that don't have clear images?
For abstract words, create mental stories or link them to emotions or experiences. For example, freedom could be tied to a memory of a trip or feeling of joy. Analogies and comparisons to familiar concepts also help anchor meanings.
What role does reading play in vocabulary acquisition?
Reading exposes you to words naturally in context. It builds passive vocabulary and deepens understanding of usage and nuance. Choose materials at your level, challenging but not frustrating. This helps you learn efficiently and enjoy the process.
Should learners look up every unknown word while reading?
Not always. Guess meanings from context first. If crucial for understanding, then look up the word. Otherwise, note it down and revisit later. Seeing words repeatedly in different contexts helps you learn them better than interrupting reading constantly.
Would a separate reading vocabulary journal be helpful?
Some learners find it useful to keep a separate journal for reading words, especially if they're more formal or literary. Others prefer one integrated notebook. The important thing is to organize and review consistently.
Can you share any success stories about fast vocabulary mastery?
One learner focused on quality over quantity, learning fewer words but using them actively. She practiced shadowing daily and kept a detailed notebook. Within 6 months, her vocabulary and confidence grew dramatically, and she passed an advanced English exam. Another used gamified apps and weekly speaking clubs, making steady, enjoyable progress. These examples show effective methods work. Me too, Sarah. Vocabulary mastery is a journey, and with the right strategies, anyone can succeed. Ready when you are.
Now that we've explored how to build vocabulary effectively and stay motivated, let's discuss how learners can track their progress and keep improving over time. What's your advice on this?
Tracking progress is essential, Sarah. One of the best ways is to regularly record yourself speaking or reading aloud. When you listen back, you notice improvements in pronunciation, fluency, and vocabulary use that might be hard to catch in the moment. It's also very motivating to hear how far you've come.
Recording yourself sounds a bit intimidating for some learners. How can they get comfortable with it?
It's normal to feel shy or self-critical at first. I suggest starting with very short recordings, maybe 30 seconds to a minute. Pick a familiar text, like a paragraph from a book or a journal entry you wrote. Record, listen, and note areas you want to improve, then try again. Over time, the fear fades as you focus on growth, not perfection.
How often should learners do this recording and self-review?
Once or twice a week is enough to start. Consistency is more important than quantity. Regular recordings help you monitor subtle changes and keep you motivated. It also trains your self-awareness, so you can correct errors faster.
Switching gears, mindset is often overlooked but very important. How does a positive mindset affect vocabulary learning?
Mindset is a foundation. Learners with a positive, growth-oriented mindset embrace challenges and mistakes as opportunities. Instead of thinking, "I'm bad at vocabulary," they say, "I'm improving every day." This mental attitude fuels persistence and reduces anxiety, which makes learning more effective.
What practical steps can learners take to develop this mindset?
First, practice catching negative thoughts and replacing them with positive ones. For example, change "I can't remember this word" to "I'm learning and I'll get it soon." Visualization helps. Imagine yourself speaking confidently with a rich vocabulary. Journaling about small wins and challenges builds gratitude and awareness. Also, surround yourself with encouraging people and good learning resources.
Motivation can dip when progress feels slow. What's your advice to learners feeling discouraged?
Remind yourself that language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. Progress is often invisible day to day but accumulates over time. Celebrate small victories. Every new word mastered or sentence formed is a step forward. Keeping a progress journal or checklist makes those wins visible. Also, take breaks when needed but come back refreshed.
Celebrating small wins sounds simple but powerful. Why is this important?
It reinforces positive habits and motivation. Rewarding your effort, even with something small like a favorite snack or a walk, creates a positive feedback loop. This encourages consistent practice and builds confidence. Recognizing progress keeps the journey enjoyable.
Can you share a personal moment when celebrating a vocabulary milestone boosted your confidence?
Certainly. I remember when I first held a 10-minute conversation with a native speaker without resorting to my native language. I was so proud I treated myself to a nice dinner. That moment was a huge confidence boost and reminded me why I committed to learning English. These milestones fuel ongoing motivation.
That's inspiring, Mark. As we wrap up, what final advice do you have for learners wanting to master English vocabulary fast and easy?
Be patient and kind to yourself. Speak, read, and write as much as possible. Use active methods to learn vocabulary and embrace mistakes. Set realistic goals and track your progress. Surround yourself with supportive communities and enjoy the journey. Remember, vocabulary mastery opens doors to confident communication and new opportunities.
Thank you so much for all your valuable insights today. I feel motivated and ready to apply these strategies.
You're very welcome, Sarah. I'm glad to hear that. Keep practicing, stay curious, and have fun with English. I look forward to hearing about your progress soon.
Me too. Thanks again, Mark. Until next time.
Until next time, Sarah. Keep shining with your English vocabulary.